Hello, welcome to Daily Reflection number 3, episode number 3 of our Catholic Bible Daily Reflections podcast here on YouTube. My name is Caroline, and welcome back and welcome. Welcome back if you are returning from our prior episode number 2. Where we were discussing Genesis chapters 1, 2, and 3. And welcome if you are newly watching my podcast. I have this new podcast to provide daily reflections, commentary, a discussion around the Bible, specifically the Catholic Bible, and to really dive into and help us all grow in our relationship with God. Today is Daily Reflection number 3, episode number 3, and I am talking about Genesis chapters 4, 5, and 6. So let's get started in chapter 4. We left off in chapter 3 with Adam and Eve being thrown out of the Garden of Eden. It was blocked off from them forever, and as punishment for original sin, God had greatly increased Eve's labor pains, and Adam was to toil the ground in order to get food for him and his wife Eve. And so in chapter 4, we see that Eve has had 2 sons, Cain and Abel, and they grew up to be young men. Abel was a hunter, and he gave the first of his flocks as a sacrifice, as a symbol to God, an offering to God. And Cain, also a young man at this point, was a tiller of the ground. He grew plants and vegetables and all sorts of greenery, and he presented those to God. But Cain was starting to see the distaste that God had for Cain's offerings and the pleasure that God had in Abel's offerings. And so Cain grew jealous, angry, hostile towards his brother Abel. And this is the start, the growing of the original sin. We see the devil unleashed into the world because of original sin, and we see sin. Sin, as everybody knows, is fear, doubt, anger, hostility, evil acts towards other people, and we see Cain's anger within him growing, and so much so that God talks to Cain and tells him, "Why are you angry, and why has your countenance fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is lurking at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must master it." It's sort of a lesson for all of us, isn't it? Where God is telling you, original sin is here. It will tempt you. It is right there at the door for you. You must learn to master it and avoid the temptation towards sin. But Cain grows continuously in his anger towards Abel, so much so that he entices his brother to go out into the field. And Abel, being the kind, gentle brother that he is and man that he is, he goes out with his brother, and Cain kills his brother. He then buries his brother and hides the evidence of it. Again, this is more the guilt, the fruits of sin, right? We have the fruits of the Holy Spirit, we have the fruits of sin. And here we see that Cain had kind of buried the evidence and hidden it. But God knew. God knew. He tells Cain, "What have you done?" And Cain has a famous line that you may hear sometimes in politics. "Am I my brother's keeper?" Right? Have you heard that before? That is what Cain says to God. And God tells him, "Abel's blood is calling out to me from the ground." And so he curses Cain. and he tells him, cursed and out of my sight. And Cain, out of fear, says, what will I do? I will be marked as a man who has committed this act, and men will kill me. And God says, not so. In chapter 4, he says, no, I will mark you as a sign to others that no one can kill you, which leads us to Cain having to live with the guilt of having killed his brother. And Cain goes on in his life away from the presence of God, and he marries, he has descendants, and we see that he settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden, and this was all the beginning of civilization. So we have Cain's line that has descendants, one of those being Lamech having two wives, and he ended up killing a man for angering him. And we see that it is sort of this growing wickedness in the land and on the earth. And we then see that Adam and Eve have another son, and Eve says, she was granted another son in place of Abel, who Cain had killed, and she names him, or they name him, Seth. And Seth was made in the image of Adam, who was in the image of God, and he was a good descendant of Adam. He was the line that God then blessed, and Seth's line goes all the way through the Bible, through to Jesus. Not Cain's line, but Seth through Adam. He was the son after Abel's death. And so that takes us into chapter 5, and we talk about the goodness of Seth and the lineage that takes us down through to Noah, actually, because he's a descendant of Seth's line. So we see all the way through to through Seth's line, and we see that Lamech, another son, but that's a son on the Seth side, not on Cain's side. And Lamech had a son named Noah, and Noah was the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So we start to see Noah pop up in the Bible in Genesis 4, 5, and 6, starting mostly in line 6, chapter 6. But we see here that growing wickedness, right? We have Cain's line of wickedness. We see that Seth's line is a good lineage, and it leads us to Noah. Noah was a very righteous man in the eyes of God. And he walked with God, it tells us here. In chapter 6 especially, we see this growing wickedness of the earth around Noah's time. So Noah, we say here in chapter 5 that he was 500 years old before he became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And then in chapter 6, we see that the starting description of this growing wickedness. And we see first that the sons of God, angels, had come to the earth and had taken mortal women as their wives and had sons and daughters. And these you will see later referenced as the Nephilim. These are giants in this land. So there were giants in the time of Noah, and there was a growing wickedness, and God was seeing this wickedness. And he was growing more and more disappointed in the creation. He had created us for love, for community, right? To be in communion with God, to walk on the earth with God. And you had this growing wickedness, the angels of God, these fallen angels who had sons and daughters with humans. They became the Nephilim, the giants. And we see the growing wickedness and anger and all of the fruits of sin in this time. So much so that God says, "My spirit shall not abide in mortals forever, for they are flesh, and their days shall be 120 years." So he limits their lifespan to 120 years. He talks about the wickedness here in God's word. He talks about the Lord saw that the wickedness of humankind was great on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of their hearts was only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that he had made humankind on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. God is a God of love. He is a God that created humanity to abide with him. And so this caused him great sorrow and grief. But Noah was the bright spot. Noah was a good man, righteous. And it says here, Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. And of course, he had his sons Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And it says here in Genesis 6:11, the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. God saw that the earth was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted its ways upon the earth. I will tell you, there are so many people out there that try to compare and do a good job of it, comparing the days of Noah before the flood to the end times today, the days that we're living in right now. And even Our Lady has come in various apparitions that are approved by the Catholic Church. And as a Catholic, you must know of many of them already, Fatima being one of the most important and prevalent ones. But there were others before and after, and also famous, very important scholarly men, priests of the church, who have also shared comparisons to this time in chapters 4, 5, and 6. We see that. Just as examples, I will tell you, Our Lady of La Salette in 1846, she said that when the Virgin Mary appeared to her, to this woman, the Virgin Mary wept and gave messages warning of a severe crisis of faith and widespread immorality. The sins of men, especially a lack of respect for the divine and the Sabbath, were calling down God's justice. We have Our Lady of Akita, Japan in 1973. She, the Virgin Mary, gave a message warning of a time when the devil would infiltrate the church and society. She warned that unless humanity repented and offered reparation, a terrible chastisement would fall upon all humanity, describing a scale of suffering that some theologians have compared to the days of the Great Flood. We see Father Stefano Gobi. He was a well-known Italian priest. He funded a Marian movement of priests, and he has widely published writings, and he frequently referred to the times of Noah. He described the current era as one where humanity has universally turned away from God, plunged into violence, moral relativism, spiritual blindness, much like the generation before the flood. We see Padre Pio, a very famous priest, and he saw angels and demons. And he was, out of the 20th century, of course, talked about the growing wickedness. And he has said, not only in his writings, but in what he has said, he warned that the world was spiraling into a dark period akin to the times of Noah, and warned of the need of prayer and reparation to stave off divine chastisement. Also important, exorcist priests. So we have in the Catholic Church priests who are specifically exorcists. And they talked about and warned that society's embrace of the occult, widespread immorality, and violence mirrors the pre-flood era. They often note the increase in demonic activity in the modern world is comparable to the times of Noah, as detailed in Genesis. So we have very comparable. Like I said, there are many scholars, many people who compare the times that we're living in now with the times of before the flood and the growing wickedness. We also talk about the modern times as compared to the days before the flood, a total corruption of thoughts and intentions, just as we were just talking about in Genesis 6:5, chapter 6, line 5, where it was written in God's word, every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil at the time. You think about the times that we're living in now, and people, it's kind of upside down. People are calling evil things good and good things evil. If you are a follower of God and a Christian or a Catholic, how are you degraded in society or shoved off as, being Bible lovers and kind of crazy, right? And they talk about today abortion being a right you have to be able to have this. The killing of your own children, much like the sacrifices that men and women made of their own children, putting them through the fire. We'll see that in the Bible. You talk about gay marriage and transgenderism today, and just this crisis of your own identity being okay, and anyone that talks negatively against it is talked to be a homophobe or an evil person, someone who is not following God. It's completely upside down. Imagine what it was like in the times of Noah before the flood, where people shut out God. They didn't know God, right? And they started to develop their own ways of doing things. Cain murdering Abel. If you were angry with someone, to kill that person, to, the fighting and wickedness and just evil thoughts, lust, in the times of Noah versus the times now. Right? We've shut out God just as in that time. People didn't know God. They shut out God. It was a sort of just this time of crisis of identity and creation growing, right? But not having that moral compass to set the path with God. Now, Noah, being exceptional, was walking with God, very righteous, right? And so we have mentioned in Genesis chapter 6, line 11, the earth was corrupt in God's sight and was filled with violence. Do we not see violence in our day today? Do we not see this evil, the world prone to violence? Very parallel, spiritual blindness and mundane preoccupation. We have spiritual blindness, shutting out of God in politics. You cannot mix God and politics, right? Church and state, the separation. When that happened, obviously it leads to spiritual blindness. And people don't want to be told what to do, right? They don't want to have anybody tell them what's moral and right. We see the wickedness, atheistic indifference to God, a preoccupation with things that are not godly, right? Aliens. And I think I saw in the new movie, the Steven Spielberg movie, where he was saying, it'll shake your faith and make you question about God, right? So it's in today's society, the inclination towards God is shunned, and the inclination towards evil is celebrated, really. And so we see interfacing with the demonic realm, Satanist churches, Satanist rituals, right? It's not talked often about it, but it is out there. And think about the demonic activity of today as compared to back in the time of Noah, right? Scholars talk about it's being very equivalent, where there was a lot of demonic activity. Satan was in the world now. Original sin was in the world now, and he was running rampant, and that is so true as today as well. So we see this parallel, the growing wickedness, the parallel to today versus the time of Noah before the flood. And so in the end of chapter 6, God says to Noah, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. Now I'm going to destroy them along with the earth. And so he instructs Noah to build the ark. And he waited patiently. God waited patiently for the ark to be built because he saw the righteousness of Noah and he didn't want to, in his love, in God's great love, he didn't want to destroy a righteous man, a righteous family, right? And the good creation that he made, that God made. He didn't want to totally destroy all animals and every moving thing on the earth, but the growing wickedness was to such a point that he was going to take action. He was going to right the wrongs that were existing on the earth. And he did so, but he waited patiently for Noah to build the ark. And I will tell you also, when we talk about comparisons, we talk about the Virgin Mary, Our Lady, who appeared in these various apparitions, warning of God's coming chastisement. There are comparisons to the apparitions at Fatima, to this specifically, and the ark, because Noah built an ark according to God's specifications, and it saved humanity, Noah and his family, and every living creature on the earth at the time, in pairs, male and female. And we see with Our Lady, she is called the new Ark of the Covenant because God dwelled within her, and within her came the saving of humanity, right? Jesus Christ. So there was, if you know about Fatima, Fatima on the last day, I believe, or it was I have it in my notes, but on one of the days of the apparitions, the lady had told the three children that she would appear and she would perform a miracle. There would be a miracle from God to show that she was who she said she was. And it's the miracle of the Son. And that miracle specifically is compared to the time of Noah, where the great flood, right? It rained for 40 days and 40 nights in the flood, which we'll see in starting in chapter 7, of course. But the flood caused all the rain, right? There was this rain which caused the earth to flood, and then it took time for that to recede. Well, in the Fatima apparition, Our Lady, it was raining, and everything was drenched on the ground. Everything was drenched in the ground. And then the sun jumped in the sky and shook in the sky, and then it spun around and had bright colors, and then it started to look like it was falling to the earth, and it scared people. People were terrified. There are pictures of it in the newspapers at the time because there were many photographers there. And so it's compared to this time of the flood because we have the rain, we have the ark, and we have Our Lady being the new Ark of the Covenant, and the sun dancing in the sky and then falling to the earth, and then the earth being dried instantaneously as a result, and the flood, of course, eventually stopped and the water receded. So all of this is sort of a foreshadowing to the future apparition from Our Lady, the miracle that God created, the miracle of the sun, and this new ark of Noah, Ark of the Covenant, in Moses' time, and then of course with Our Lady. So I will just say that, you can see these parallels. You can see the growing wickedness as we see in chapters 4, 5, and 6, and the coming of God's actions to right the wrongs that he believes he had created in humanity, this growing evil, the entry of original sin into the world, the entry of the devil into the world. And so we'll leave off with chapter 6 there, where Noah is building the ark, and then the ark is completed right at the end of chapter 6. And we'll start again with chapter 7, talking about the Great Flood in more detail. And then we could talk about Fatima again in that time. But scholars do compare these times to, these times today to those times of Noah before the flood. I hope that you have enjoyed this sort of discussion about chapters 4, 5, and 6. I know there was a lot to unpack there. I hope and pray that you will leave me comments if you have enjoyed particular parts of this discussion. If there's things that I can improve upon, of course, I would love to hear that. If you have prayers you would like for me to pray for you as I pray for my own self and my own family, I would love to be able to pray for you, and hope and pray that you have a good rest of your day and a good rest of your week. Today is Friday, so we will carry on again with Monday and Daily Reflection number 4, episode number 4. I hope, again, that you have a good day, good rest of your week, and take care.